Here we're talking about like retention benchmarks, because of course, like for many of us, like retention is really pretty simple but pretty good reflection and way to understand the quality of the game, how that's perceived by the user. So it's really good to understand, okay, what is really happening around the market, and Matti will share the stuff around it. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Hi, good evening. Okay, guys, great to be here. Mariusz, thanks for having me. As always, great to be a part of a GameCamp. I'll try to be brief. I know that even the greatest retention presentation don't stand a chance against beers and pizza, so bear with me for this time. Also, hello to everyone online, and let's move forward. So, what we'll try to be talking to you in the next 20 minutes is, first of all, the retention benchmarks and insights, what you can expect, what you shouldn't be expecting when it comes to retention as well, and then share the 6 strategies to retain your users in 2023, because as you might probably know, things has changed in the last year quite a lot. Now, why I'll be talking to you about retention, I think I want to focus on the fact that I'm working for AppsFlyer. For those who don't know what AppsFlyer is, we are the marketing leader in the mobile attribution. And that's exactly why we're talking about retention. We have 65% of the market share of the global apps, which means we see that quite a lot of the tacit data when it comes to the retention of the users and understanding their behaviors. And that's what is all based. So also feel free to shoot any questions if you have during the presentation. Now, before we move there, I want to take a moment and appreciate the fact on what kind of market and industry and verticals we're working at. So first of all, I want to mention that's maybe not so obvious when you think about it, but our industry has already 10 years, right? It's been 10 years since the guy from Apple came into the stage and said, okay, hey, this is iPhone. And a year after, that's an app store. So it means that the competition and the fight for the impression, clicks, and actual engagement of the user is completely dramatically different than from what it was a couple of years back. Second of all, we had a very unprecedented event, which is called the COVID pandemic, where probably all of you that worked in this industry at the time has experienced quite unusual behavior of the users. I mean, no matter what video networks we talk to, DSPs, they're like, hey, new users, new device IDs, this is amazing, let's continue. Well, this year, basically this time is completely gone, right? We really moved to a quite different timeline right now. We have a horrible war that's basically our neighbors are fighting. We have a COVID hangover, so to say, right? So don't print more money at home. We are affected by this. We see actually that the cost of living is increasing. However, I also want to point out, I've been talking to a couple of VCs and investors lately, that this is also a time for you, if you are working with your app, with your game, a time to find those pockets of growth. I think it falls in very nicely into Dimi's presentation, and then moving forward with those topics. Why I'm saying about it, because also the user behavior is highly affected, as you will see, by those specific factors. Now, why? Very briefly about that. I just want to also tell you. So I've been to Slash like a couple of months back, and what's funny? All those companies, what has one thing in common? They were founded during the economic crisis of 2008 to 2009, right? And all of them are thriving here. And this is, I think, very beautiful also statement to the fact that although we hear quite a lot of, okay, the economic condition is worsening, we don't see such a growth as during the COVID. Yes, it's all true, but we're still in a very, very good place as an industry. And that becomes pretty apparent when you look at the data. So keep that in mind, and basically don't be afraid to continue working with the apps. Show of hands, who's working with gaming apps? Okay, great. Non-gaming? Very good. Great. So I have data for both. But we'll start with the basics, okay? Because we also hear quite a lot of, there are different definitions when it comes to retention, and different ways that you measure retention. And in general, why we even talk about the retention. For me, retention are two things. First of all, it's a certain habits that you build of your users, right? I mean, it's basically certain habits that your users learn, that they are used to, and they're coming back to kind of repeat this pattern, have it slightly change, but in general, they know what they expect. Second of all, it's a bridge between user acquisition, performance, product, and then re-engagement, right? So this is a metric that encompasses all of it, because you can, of course, acquire good or bad user, but then the question is if the user's expectation of your game or app is met when they're in the game. We can continue this discussion offline, also talking about misleading ads. I mean, I think our industry saw it all. But this is something quite important to mention as well, that again, retention is a metric that's very often overlapping across those different teams. And when we talk to the different studios, probably a metric that also is one of the most important when it comes to, shall we continue with this game or project, or shall we kill it, right? When you talk about day 1, day 3, and day 7 or day 30. The other metric that's quite similar to the retention, and it's a product stickiness. Not sure if you are using this one. Talking to quite a lot of VCs, definitely something they're looking at. So basically, daily active users divided by monthly active users, and that's the ratio. What do you say is, what do you consider is a good ratio, or the product stickiness in gaming? Yes, that's actually an amazing ratio. So it would be a bit worse than that. What would you say is a... No. 25% is actually means you're a very good spot. 20% is what we see is good. Is, I would say, the average that you can definitely live with. Below 20%, you can start thinking about it. Okay, how to improve it, how to work on it. So 20%, 25% is exceptionally good. 100% is wow. For one user, exactly. Moving on. Okay, now there have been a lot of talks about those different factors that I mentioned, but let's look about on Android daily retention from day 1 to day 30. The regular ones. We can see that from Q3 2020, right? Middle of lockdown, nobody leaves homes, everyone's on their phones. Q3 2021 and Q3 2022. I think the interesting part to notice, obviously the retention is going down a little bit. We have a different things to focus on. I really love actually from Mariusz's presentation from the last GameCamp, noticing that gaming is also fighting for the entertainment, right? And there's different ways to entertain if you're actually out of home, which also makes sense a lot about the time that you spend in your in the app and in the game. But once again, I start from the high level. This is Android, right? I mean, encompassing all the Android apps. This is not very telling for your specific category. But it's also important to say there. What's interesting is looking at the iOS users, right? Look how flat it is. Compared to the Android one. Interesting part here, and I think this also is quite telling about us as human beings, we don't change our behavior that much. So I think the important part to note is, yes, retention is a great benchmark. It's not changing that much when it comes to our behaviors. I think everyone who tried to quit unhealthy habit can tell that, like, I don't know, quit smoking or eating something is not so easy to change our behaviors. And it's very similar to that. If we are used to a certain type of game, a certain type of genre, we will be playing in a similar ways. Obviously, there could be winners or losers when it comes to the product live ops. We're going to talk about it soon. But as a human behavior, retention doesn't change that much. Now, let's talk about different vertical. Is there like one size fits all for retention? Absolutely not. Think how you use different apps on your phone, right? There's a completely different way of news apps, right? That you want to know what's happening every day, rather than, I don't know, let's take travel. Is like how often do you book Airbnb or go to Booking to actually go somewhere for the weekend? So really, when you think about retention and you think about how to compare to it, think first of all about your benchmark, right? So what is your pocket of growth here? What kind of a user behavior you expect to see? And only then try to understand if it's good or bad, because it's not like the retention, the higher the better, or that's the only way that uses our apps or games. Now, I think we'll have a quick breakdown from the games genres, because again, this is a completely different one. So what we see from day 1, day 7, day 14, definitely day 1 for iOS users on casual is higher. It's even up to 37% when it comes to all games. This is US Q4 2022. And then moving forward with the day 7, day 14, this is still remains on a similar level, and then day 30, 5 to 6%. This is something you can expect when you look at the casual benchmark. Now, when it goes to the midcore ones, again, this also goes to the fact that this is a completely different type of gameplay. To actually retain those users, I think, you've heard it quite a lot in the previous presentation as well, that looking for those whales that actually are making up most of the revenue for the midcore games. So you can also see that the users that are not so engaged throughout, very often it's also gated content when it comes to the in-app purchases. The retention is lower than casual, but day 33% is still the benchmark that you can expect. Couple of benchmarks here still: social casino and action RPG. Very similar ones, and I think what's worth mentioning here, if you would also like to see more in terms of your genre or your vertical, please let me know after the presentation. We have the retention benchmark. And that being said, and I think now we're coming to the most interesting part of the presentation, because the fact is, if you look from 2018 and 19, I was comparing the reports while preparing for this talk, there's not so much of a change, right? It could be a couple of percent, but basically all the genres have a similar benchmarks since 2018 to 2022. Now, because we promised that we'll present something that has never been presented before, and if I would just stick to that, probably Mariusz would kick me out already here. We're gonna look at the metric that we never shown before, which is the retention of paying users. When we first came up with that with our analysts, we thought there's a mistake in data. Because if you remember what happened, the retention of paying users, like this is insane, right? Day 14, day 30, like more than 40%, this is insane. So we were like 100% sure there's a mistake. We went through that again, there's no mistake, both on Android, iOS, this is something what you can expect, which I think, again, to be completely clear, and everyone mobile gaming and mobile apps know it, is not like 50% of users are paying users, it's 3 to 5% of your audience. But this justifies a lot about the campaigns for the in-app purchases, for the ROAS, and for getting to this specific high-value user. Because their engagement is unmatched with the rest of the users if you saw it before. And that's for the casual games retention. It doesn't look much different for midcore, right? So in midcore, extremely high, and also for the methodology, because since the new metric, maybe I should explain. Day 0 is the first in-app purchase in the game, okay? And then we look at all these players that stayed basically from the first in-app purchase until today. What we're working on right now, but again, the data sets, we still need to make sure that it's big enough, and there are no outliers. Is basically for the next GameCamp to prepare the retention of recurring paying users, which I think will be also a very interesting metric. But you see it here first. This is on the top midcore games. These are for the US. And one more caveat here on both retention and retention of paying users is the following. And this is nice for the big studios, not so nice for the small studios. The retention also differs by even 8 percentage points from day 1 and day 7 for the top games, so top 50 games. Then it goes down 4% for the medium games, and the smaller games have much more retention. The question is why? You might think about it like, okay, is the product to market fit better? Is it because they know the game already? Is it because of the various IPs, which we'll also discuss? I think this year also going to be a year of IPs. But those are the facts. So actually, if you, and I was showing that the top games retention, if your game, like if your retention rate that was not on par, also keep in mind that the size of the app and the size of the audience actually affects retention. Okay, key takeaways from this part. Retention is more important than ever. We'll talk about in a second why. I mean, I think you all know it's harder to get a UA. It's not anymore like, we have IDFA, GAD, suppression list, let's go. Let's open the budgets and try to get as many users as possible. Now you actually are facing a choice. Is it more efficient and effective to keep a specific user or than to find new users on different networks? We are very stubborn as our behaviors, and I think this goes much deeper there. But the trends are relatively stable. So if there's a retention report, you can probably compare it to the one from the last year, and there wouldn't be many changes, which is of course a good thing because your benchmark stays more or less the same, right? You understand when is a good time or bad time to move from the game. And definitely that's something that we highly encourage you to check yourself. This presentation will be available after that. The retention of paying users. I think very interesting benchmark to cope with, and I think the key takeaway, yes, sometimes it's a tough decision to spend more on those campaigns for the in-app purchases or ROAS. It does bring the value for the retention. I mean, we saw it on casual, we saw it on Midcore, the mixed monetization model, in-app purchases and ads, or rewarded ads. Try to experiment with those strategies because they might bring really good results. Okay, give me 5 more minutes and I promise you we can go for beers. 6 retention strategies for 2023. Something that has been talked about a lot, right? We discussed the content fortresses, we discussed the cross-lifetime value. Apple did a little bit of an earthquake with the SCAD network and IDFA. Now, when we look at the cross-promo and cross-lifetime value across your portfolio, this is something that for a long time was treated as option C or D even in the gaming world, right? Because, well, it was easier and faster to acquire a new user for your game. What we are experiencing right now with a lot of top clients of ours, which have a huge portfolio, is the cross promotion. Probably you've seen that as an M&A as one of the trends in the market, right? It started between studios acquiring studios. Now we have giants like, I don't know, Microsoft, Netflix, building those huge content fortresses for a very simple reason. This is your first-party data. This is your own data, right? So if you know that the retention, like this user is going to churn, because churn is the opposite of retention, if it's going to churn, why not actually keep them within the portfolio? So measuring the portfolio retention, I think that's going to be a 2023 trend, and we already see quite a lot of discussions and questions that are coming from our clients when it comes to measuring the cross-lifetime value per portfolio. Now, deep linking. Again, our industry addicted to user-level data for a long time and addicted to the paid channels, which definitely still is a huge chunk of it. But when it comes to deep linking, we had a great presentation on creatives. Let's say the YouTube, you run the influencer campaign for the live ops. You're saying, okay, look, there's a new mode activated in the game. Use the deep linking for the customer experience. Send them directly to this new mode rather than sending them to the home page and keeping them, so to say, lost in your game or app. I think here's a big shout out to Call of Duty team. I think they're doing that amazingly with the seasons, and that's working very, very well. Again, this was I'm not sure if you've seen that. Coinbase, what they did, they basically get a 60-second QR code running around during the Super Bowl. This was a very bold move, but thanks to the owned media, 20 million scans in 60 seconds, and then jumping from the number 184 to number 2 in the iOS App Store. So that's more of a stunt, but definitely you can see that as well, that getting creative with owned media is interesting. Leveraging owned media. This is again web to app. I mean, huge topic. How to avoid the Apple Store tax, right? 30%. Can we move into the web? Huge discussion, ruling happening in Netherlands, right? That Apple needs to allow it for the dating apps. I think the industry is going this way as well. This is something to consider, that we will have some kind of sort of a prevalence when it comes to different ways of basically monetizing your games and apps. So again, quite important to use social to app referrals. Again, a lot of gaming and a lot of apps are based on the communities. Use it. This is not a paid campaign. This basically only takes time and resources to set up, but you don't necessarily pay for it. And this is also some data to actually back it up. And then again, remember when we were talking about the paying users, that those users really make sense. Look at the rate by channels and verticals when it comes to the owned media. So text to app in food and drink, and share of paying users compared to not using the owned media. That's something definitely interesting. I mean, social to app in gaming is one of the latest trends we see. Re-engagement campaigns, again, I don't want to repeat myself, but re-engagement, this is something that for specific genres makes a lot of sense. Again, depends on which genre you are operating in. And this is also part of the report. I think it makes a lot of sense for some of the industries and some of the genres to actually think about it, the remarketing campaigns, both on the paid networks, just to mention Google or Meta, when we still can, so to say, so before the depreciation of other identifiers, and then leveraging your first-party data, which obviously we're heading there for all the good reasons when it comes to the privacy-centric measurement. Same for the own media, and then this is like two last points, and I want to stop here, but for a second, because I feel like an industry. Once again, we had this. Let's call it a grief time, right? That we had to bury the user level data and say, okay, we won't be doing that. Probabilistic will probably at one point also, once the scan, the new scan framework from Apple is ready for that, will probably also go away. So I think, and what we see quite a lot is that a lot of, well, gaming studios is trying to avoid the topic, right? Like, okay, we're gonna sort of solve it somehow, but maybe not now, but let's not really prepare for it. And I think Scan 4.0 was released like 2 weeks ago, and it is already a very, I would say, complete solution if you actually start utilizing it, thinking about it, how you can use it. It offers up to 3 postbacks. So again, yes, it is different. It is not user-level data, but it is changing, and the industry is going this way. And I think it's also very important not to try to avoid the topic or deny it, but rather try to see how you can use those new measurement frameworks in your advantage and actually get better with that. And lastly, compare against the benchmark retention data, and this is highly recommended. Our benchmark site is available to everyone. You can put your genre, put the country or category that's of your interest, and just compare how you're doing compared to your peer set. So, thank you very much for that. Happy to discuss any of those topics, and that's it.
Thank